thought it'd be really good fun to talk about, like a ready, steady cook kind of challenge with what have you got in your fridge, in your larder, that thing that you've been avoiding cooking because you don't like it or you don't know what to do with it. Paul's pretty handy in the kitchen, and he'll be able to tell you what to do. So let us know who and where you are as well. Some great messages coming in. Good morning, Carl, and everyone. Hope you have a great Sunday. Trousers, please stand up so we can check. You know, you really don't want me to do that. You don't want to see my ancient long johns. And I have to find out where I can get some proper good old grandpa type long johns in Portugal to replace these that I'm sporting at the moment. And so that I don't have to talk about my long johns anymore, I'm delighted to be able to add to the stream Cress and Paul of Village Kitchen. You saved me there. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Hi, Carl. Hi, Carl.
Morning.
Are you well?
Absolutely.
You look and sound very well, and I need to fact check the story of Village Kitchen, because I was saying it was a response to the COVID closure of the restaurant, and then you very brilliantly thought of this idea. So do you want to tell us the story?
Sure. Well, annoying echo.
If you turn your volume down a little bit on your laptop, that might help a tad with that.
All right. We've been thinking about doing like a while, and with a few ideas because we've wanted to, there's no deliveries really in central Portugal, and we're very passionate about food, and I guess when all this happened, it all kind of came together, and we just sort of went for it.
Brilliant. You make it sound so simple and easy. I mean, was it simple and easy?
Yeah. It all together quick. Picking a name was quite hard. It was like 2 days of suggesting millions of different ideas for names until Village Kitchen just sort of settled with us, didn't it?
It did, yeah, definitely. I mean, as you probably know, Carl, I'm really passionate about food as well. And I'd always sort of providing that kind of service to any people sort of coming to rent the space here. But not something that I could really do on my own. There's a lot of work involved, both from obviously the cooking and delivering perspective, but also from the admin side as well. So I think, we talked about how much we miss delivered food to our door, me in particular. And yes, when the situation happened, we just had to reassess our work, and we wanted to also support the community and sort of put a smile on people's faces too. So it took about a week, and we launched and went for it then.
Brilliant. I'm muting my mic when you speak so that it's a little bit easier and it makes the sound quality better. So it sounds like a transatlantic call or one of those old calls from the 70s from England to Australia. But we'll persist with that. There's no problem at all. And there's a bit of backstory there. You mentioned renting out here. What would be really nice, given that Good Morning Portugal was all about, making a new life in Portugal, and you guys have done that, are doing that. It'd be lovely to hear your backstories of both Amigos and your project there. I don't know who wants to go first to bring us up to date on, what your experience of being in Portugal as an expat is.
John, you go first.
Well, I moved to Portugal 3 years ago and bought the property here. And then I've gently been renovating it since that time. I say gently, it's been a hard slog, lots of ups and downs. And I'm now at the stage where the ruin on the land has been completely renovated. And this spring was going to be the sort of final stage of the project, which was just putting together the sort of gardens and individual space for guests. That's obviously had to be put on hold with the situation. And then after that, once, perhaps I did get some bookings, it would be sort of teaching people a little bit about permaculture and sort of growing and living from the land, and just giving them a space where they could feel relaxed and perhaps take a little bit of time for themselves, because often, we do live busy, hectic city lives, and just appreciate nature again. And I think actually, the situation that we're in, that's something that both Paul and I have really appreciated, being here at the house and still being able to go on walks in the woods And with spring coming through and summer coming through, I personally couldn't be happier about where we are situated. So
doing a bit of foraging.
That's right. We made some wild forage pesto the other day from the terraces, which was lovely.
Was really good.
No. Oh, listen to you two. Listen, this is untouched by world events almost. Foraging on the terrace. It does sound so good. We'll come back to that because we want to share a few recipes this morning about what you forage, because you're obviously still alive as a result.
We've actually made jam donuts today.
Sorry, say that again. What are they?
Jam donut.
What, made at home?
Yeah, I made it this morning.
Ah, now we're talking.
Never mind
about healthy forage stuff. Yeah, healthy forage stuff could wait for a moment. But
we forage.
We need the jam donut recipe in a moment. And Paul, over to you then for your story of being in Portugal. Thanks, Cress, by the way, for that. And we do need to let people know where you are, so that, I mean, if you do return to that business model, they can find you when all this is over, so to speak. It's like being in the war. When all this is over, they can come and stay with you. So, Paul, your story in Portugal.
Well, my parents moved out here about 7 years ago, and I just kept coming out to visit them sort of on a holiday. But because they had the cafe, I was just helping them set up ideas that would work. And the more I came out here, the more I fell in love with the actual country. And then they wanted to take it a bit easier, and I just wanted to be out here. So they asked me to come over and help, which I did. And then they finally got to properly retire last August, and sort of been running the place since then, full on with just me and other help. And I mean, that's it in a nutshell, really.
Okay, sorry, just unmuting my there. Okay, fine. So should we just cut to the donuts and have done?
Yeah.
How do you make jam donuts? I mean, we have got a one request already, which is fantastic. And I'm going to have to, while you're telling everyone about how to make jam donuts at home, and they look very professional to me. The jam is oozing out of them like a crime scene, like a some sort of diabetic crime scene. But I've got to find out what palmito palmera is. If you don't know,
is that some kind of king cream?
I think, did you say, is it organic skin cream? Because that's going to make for a lovely recipe. Maybe on toast. We'll find out. But jam donuts, go on.
Oh, jam donuts. Okay. Okay, so you mix flour, yeast, eggs, butter,
lemon zest,
a golden custard sugar. You got to have a dough maker to do this, and because you need to. God damn it. You need to mix it on medium for about 8 minutes, and then add the butter, and then mix it on fast for about 15. And then you leave it to set overnight to rise. And then I was up at 6 this morning doing it, because you have to take them out, boil them up, and let them to rise again for 4 hours. And then you fry them. That's the easiest part. You just pop them in the fryer, both sides, they puff up. And then you sugar them, and then you fill them with jam, or with whatever you want fancy filling them with. There's some palm olive, palmito if you want.
I actually knew it.
Very good. But now we need to know what we're going to do with those palm hearts. I think they are one of those things you get in a hamper that gets put into the back of the cupboard. It's like, it's too good, obviously, and nice to put in the bin, and you don't want to give it away. But you also don't quite know what to do with it, so it can sit. And thank you. I've got something now from the Casa Munson kitchen here. Is it a jam donut?
No, it's a bit donutty. It's a sourdough.
Oh, it's a pancake.
Do you want to come on the screen here? No trousers on, no makeup on.
I haven't got any makeup on.
There she is. Look, au naturel.
Hi, Eloise.
It's got no egg.
Talk us through this, please.
It's basically.
It's like a proper food show on telly. Talk us through this. I should be eating it with my mouth full, obviously.
It's sourdough starter.
Sourdough starter.
A cup and a third of sourdough starter. 3 tablespoons of flour.
Yeah.
A small teaspoon of bicarb.
Yeah.
A teaspoon of.
It could be
sugar.
toothpaste. Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a pancake. It's a pancake, everybody. Look at that. Aren't we lucky here?
Great.
Those like fried donut things that you get.
Fried donuts. We're on the same page here this morning.
It tastes like one of those fried actually get at the fair.
Yes, excellent. Yes, I know, which has got a slightly rude sounding name in Portuguese. Yes, yes, thank you so much. A farto or something like that. Okay.
Hello.
Right, so we're all doing the same thing here, having a nice kind of donutty, pancakey.
Maybe we should play that game where you all eat at the same time. First one to lick the lips loses.
Well, I'm open to taking requests for that. Ina's tuned in, Eloise is tuned in, and I think maybe we should look at this palm heart thing now. Have you ever cooked with palm hearts?
I don't know what palm heart is going to be honest with you.
Shock horror.
You often get them in a kind of light brine, and I actually have never cooked them. They're kind of pre-cooked already. If you think of like an artichoke heart that's already canned, it's a similar texture. And so it has a light bite to it, not a huge amount of flavour, but it's something that I've always really enjoyed. And I don't have a recipe, but what I would simply do is get a very good quality olive oil and a very good quality salt, and literally just drizzle the olive oil and a sprinkling of salt on and have it like that. Very nice as, you know, sort of part of a charcuterie board or with cheeses. That kind of sort of light early summer dinner, maybe with a crisp glass of white wine.
I was going to ask you, what wine do we have with that? And then we could throw the palm hearts away and just drink the wine. But or you could do Portuguese stone soup, couldn't you? Do you know that story?
I don't. No.
It's where this.
Is that what throw down the soup?
Yeah, well, it's a guy. It's a sort of guest you don't want at your house who turns up and says, "Can I cook for you?" and gets a stone out of his pocket, and then puts the stone in the pan of boiling water and tastes it and goes, "You know what this could do with? It could do with a little bit of salt and pepper." And then it tastes it, and it's like, that's not too bad. But what it could really do with is probably some carrots and some potatoes and some onions, and they get fried up and put in with the stone, and he tastes it. He goes, actually, what would be good with this is maybe just a little bit of meat and some stock in there as well. And then he tastes it, and then he pulls the stone out and throws it away and goes, here's dinner for everybody. And that's an actual Portuguese mythical story. And that stone soup does appear on some menus, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, so there you go. But no, thank you, Chris, for that. Palm hearts, that sounds about right. So enjoy them in all their glory, heightened with some good quality olive oil, some hand-crushed sea salt on a platter with other things, and a crispy white. I'm loving this. This is fantastic. Okay, this is one of your customers, I think. It's not a complaint, which is a good thing. Great meal for my birthday, guys. Really enjoyed it. Far from a complaint. Look at this. Did you pay him to do this? Wedding anniversary soon, so we'll be having more lovely treats. Keep doing what you're doing. To you, the Village Kitchen. Isn't that lovely?
Thank you, Gary.
So tell us how it works then, because some people tuned in. I'm going to go and see if I can get Louisa to talk about sourdough starters in a minute. But tell us how the Village Kitchen works. How is it that Gary managed to get a birthday meal and is thinking of doing the same for his wedding anniversary? How does that work logistically?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you order on the website and we deliver on the Thursday. Essentially.
Nutshell.
Okay, God, I thought it might be more complicated than that. What's the website?
So the website is villagekitchen.net.
Village Kitchen, the Village, or villagekitchen.net?
No, just Village Kitchen.
Okay, all right.
And we try to make contact as little as possible. So basically, you can order your range. We have a Village Kitchen Classic range, which is kind of like the hearty British staples like pies. And then we have the VK Village Kitchen Asian range. We also do a range for vegans and vegetarians, so we don't want to leave anybody out. So you choose your products, click them into your cart, pay by card, and we also have an additional information part of the form, which is to put your GPS coordinates in, because anyone living in rural central Portugal will know it's quite hard to find properties at times. So that helps us get around.
Definitely, it has, because by people putting the actual GPS coordinates, it's literally taken me straight to the door, and had no trouble at all, touch wood, with delivering anything so far, which has been great.
Yeah, and so if somebody places an order by a Monday at 8 p.m, they will receive their delivery on the Thursday of that week between 12 and 4 p.m. And Paul does the deliveries. So they'll get to meet him.
Ladies, that's another bonus, isn't it? or men who like men, whatever. It's an excellent service.
Well, I'm using her at the moment, so we just get to see like.
Of course, yes. You don't get to see him in all his glory. So that's really simple and straightforward. Villagekitchen.net there. I have got one for you. We'll come back to sourdough because that seems to be the kind of craze of the moment, don't they? Even sourdoughs have even got names. Ours is Joe the Dough. But we have one from Kate in the UK. In the fridge, a third of a kind of sauerkraut I made a year ago with celeriac. That sounds appetizing, doesn't it?
Nice.
I did a class. Oh, okay. I did a class on fermenting foods where I made a daikon kimchi, which I only finished recently. I also have a jar of confit lemons. That's so posh. Same as preserved lemons, but explaining it to those of us who don't know what that is, same as preserved lemons, but with a little bit of sugar in with the salt. So is it, let's talk to you about sauerkraut and kimchi and fermenting. Because I think it's a bit of a Marmite thing, but is it basically safe to eat sauerkraut that was made a year ago from the fridge?
So I think just do the smell test essentially. Anything with preserves, I mean, you just, I think you just go off your own instinct. You know, I actually learned the proper way of doing sauerkraut when I was living in Austria, in Innsbruck, and one of there it's completely different because they actually rinse their sauerkraut before they use it, and they actually cook it up that goes with dishes. So they add things like onions, garlic, bacon, all sorts of kind of things to make the sauerkraut just a lot more elevated than it is. I mean, I actually love it as sort of a pickle with like on hot dogs and things like that. I think it's amazing, or with just anything like savory, like sausages and or on sandwiches. But yeah, I essentially just do the smell test with anything like that, and give it a good rinse, I would say, before you use it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, good. And then maybe test it on someone else and see how they get on. There's another way of doing it.
Definitely.
Someone else, if you're not in social isolation, or you might soon be if you try that. But anyway, but this is interesting. So from sauerkraut to sourdough, and it's interesting to know there that you could eat something that's been in your fridge for a year. This, with the collapse of just-in-time supply chain, being able to just go to the supermarket wherever you damn well please, we are being reminded, aren't we, that it might be useful to have a little bit of a larder, a bit of a pantry, some canning, some preserving. What's your view on that? And do you indulge in such occult activities?
Well, I'm massively into pickling.
Yeah.
I've got a huge selection of my own pickles. I absolutely love them.
A lot of chutneys.
A lot of chutneys. Yeah, chutneys last forever.
I think Paul's going to work on a grapefruit chutney next week. That's on the next on the list. Yeah. Very good with jams. And he wooed me actually with a jar of homemade raspberry jam, which was lovely.
I had to unmute my mic. Okay, so there's another book. Okay, wooing with preserves is obviously, or other things that the gentleman homesteader. Well, there's another. That's a sequel. That's the sequel of the book, obviously, isn't it? Because first of all, the wooing has to take place, and then other further activities can take place in the larder. Obviously, not in a commercial kitchen. We hasten to add, the larder saga, book 2 of this series. But that's amazing. So this is an interesting insight, I think, into possibly the female psyche as well. That this is possible that women, ladies, can be lured, wooed with such activities, such I suppose a reawakening of these old skills in the new world.
Oh, definitely. I think it's fascinating. And something that is on our list for this summer, we have an old stone wood oven in the shed. And so we really want to get into cooking within it, but also perhaps try smoking things. Paul's talking about his own charcuterie and, I don't know, smoking cheeses, different meats and things. But the part of the romance of me moving to Portugal on my own, which I did initially, was the whole sort of living from the land and watching the sort of cycles of the seasons. And there's so much growing around where we are. In the autumn, we have all of the blackberries and loads of figs and apples. And, you know, part of that would be preserving for the winter months. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. I get things like that. And
I
so
agree.
yeah, that all is wonderful.
Yeah, I think this is incredible and a real adventure. And you've obviously, you know, made good of this difficult situation. But it really does present some new options for the future, doesn't it? Not just for you and your business, but like into the imaginations of lots of other people. So where, you know, your original business plan or your respective business plans, you know, on the one hand to have people come and relax and recuperate and enjoy rural Portugal, and for you, Paul, to be running a fairly straightforward commercial business of, you know, a catering business. These are new and very exciting possibilities for how we might live differently, I think, and be a bit more prepared, a bit more resilient.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to use the time as much as possible, really, by doing a lot of the things that I've been wanting to do for a while. I mean, talking about the smoker, I really want to start getting into doing things like slow cooked briskets and things like that over the the summer months. I think it's a great way of of cooking, essentially. I mean, it really lifts the flavor of anything, you know.
Yeah, slow food.
That's a hell of a chat up line as well, of course, isn't it? I want to slow cook my brisket with you.
Works every
time. Right. So before we finish on a sourdough kind of note, could we talk to Gary here about making Cornish pasties, the traditional Jana food? How do we make the right pastry, and what would be good to use for filling with what we have over here, as in referring to Portugal? Over to you guys.
Sure.
I've never really been into Cornish pasties, but I can give you tips on the pastry. But is it like sort of a meat and potato filling?
Well, what I would go with, I've actually been thinking about Cornish pasties recently. So I would think to use, I think turnips are perhaps used in Cornish pasties. I might be wrong, but I would go down like a butternut squash, carrot, onion, fresh herbs, and, you know, a good sort of piece of beef, slow cooked. But there's so many different fillings you could go down. You could go down a pork and apple. You could go down a cheese and onion, a sort of curried vegetable route. There are loads. It's basically whatever you like. Shove it in some pastry.
Can't go wrong with that. With the pastry, is it all right thinking it's like the kind of oval? No, the kind of semicircle.
Yeah,
pastry. So it's quite thick.
It's quite thick around the crust.
Okay.
I come from Devon, so I know these things.
So for pastry,
Paul's from up north.
I'm from up north. We love a bit of pastry. I would for pastry. Basically, you want to use my recipe at the moment does 2 batches of good pastry for pies. It's 650 grams of strong white bread flour. You want to mix salt in there before you start. Putting the fats through it, which is I usually use equal amounts butter to fat, or if it's a vegetarian, just use butter, and then margarine. No, it's vegan.
Oh no, it's vegan.
Yeah, but if it's vegan, we're going to experiment on a vegan pie this week, which will be margarine, creme vegetal, and then you can rather use egg. Like scrambled like raw egg to bind the pastry, or you can use very cold water to do that. I like to use a mix of both. But one trick with making the pastries, have everything as cold as possible, even the dish that you're actually making it in. That is a good trick to get a nice flaky pastry.
And he also does this double roll method. So he'll roll it out to like a nice thin sort of consistency, and then he'll flip it over on itself and keep rolling it. And he does that several times, so you get this more layered, sort of crunchy flakiness on the top of the pies. So there's a little hack, I guess.
Thank you so much. I love those little bits being slipped in there. That's fantastic.
And, that one good on sausage rolls, because then you get like the nice layered pastry on a sausage roll.
Yeah, because I was going to say, my experience of proper pasties is that there's like a short crust pastry, but with the advent of Greggs and people who want to make them more addictive, they have been making a kind of more of a layered pastry with more salt and sugar and whatever else they crack and stuff that they put in there to keep people going back. But yeah. So I think that sounds fantastic, and I hope that satisfies your inquiry, Gary. I think perhaps we should let everyone drift off to their Sunday brunches, but not, of course, until we look at sourdough. Are you into the sourdough thing? Is that going on for you at the moment? Hold on a minute. Eloise says like a puff, which I'm sure is a response to something else that was said there. Is that a question or a statement, Eloise? But yes, let's go back to our first question. How do I start a sourdough starter? And are you guys into this sourdough thing at the moment?
I haven't got on the sourdough train during this epidemic. No, I know a lot of people have. I missed it completely.
Yeah, and actually I haven't been either, but my mum, so Eloise, I'm sorry, probably we're not able to start your question. I'm sure there's a million different options on Google, but my mum does know, and she also gave me a recipe recently that doesn't involve any yeast. So if you're not able to get fresh yeast or frozen yeast, you can still make a sourdough starter. So I'll see if I can get all of the information from her. Perhaps we can put it up on our Village Kitchen Facebook page.
But to answer was Eloise's other question about puff pastry, I think it's essentially what we said about rolling it out, folding it over, rolling it out and folding it over again. Do that as many times as possible to get those layers so it does puff up. A good way as well, a little tip, when you are rolling it out as flat as you can and folding it, before you fold it, just flick a little bit of water onto the pastry so it does stick, so you don't end up just moving it back and forth. Because when it does stick, it will mold together as one sheet. But when you cook it, that's when it will start separating into the layers of puff pastry that you want to achieve.
There are so many books and double entendre possibilities. Like, it's 50 layers of pastry going on here. I'm loving this and the connections that we're making. It's such a sensual thing, cooking, and you've reminded us of that beautifully this morning. And yeah, I think the sourdough, I mean, it's in the nature of sourdough, but the sourdough conversation will continue. And you make a really good point. It's because people can't get fresh yeast, isn't it? That the sourdough thing is so important and useful. And what I have to say is, living in a damp Portuguese house, the airborne spores are very conducive to starting your own sourdough. That's a terrible moment to end on. So we should redeem it from that point of view. But these guys, order on a Monday, delivery on a Thursday by the masked man. who comes via SatNav, villagekitchen.net. Do you want to make a suggestion for, what a nice easygoing Sunday? I suppose it's a contradiction in terms to talk about an easygoing Sunday roast, or is it? What would you suggest to people for the rest of the day today, after starting with a breakfast of kings, like jam donuts? What should they try tonight?
Well, we were actually going to do just a really nice roast chicken, a homemade sausage meat stuffing, fresh herbs from the terrace, all of that. And
your roast potatoes.
Oh, my roast potatoes, which she loves. But,
the best. Thanks. Absolutely amazing.
But I would probably then just try and lighten it up with a bit of a fresh salad, a nice zingy dressing, and anything else?
Pigs in blankets.
Double sausage.
He's definitely from up north, isn't he?
Put it on there.
Put pigs in blankets with it, whatever it is. Palm hearts with pigs in blankets. That's what we forgot to say earlier on. And just very lastly, then, are you prepared to give away? Sorry.
With a salad.
Well, I wouldn't do a salad. I'd do homemade meat gravy.
Would you?
I would.
There we go.
Are you prepared to give away your roast potato recipe, best in central Portugal?
Absolutely. So I always parboil. So peel potatoes, parboil in salted water, take them out, make sure that when you sort of drain them, they're just kept quite dry, so a lot of the moisture comes away. You've got your preheated tray of kind of vegetable oil or olive oil. Pop your potatoes in there, salt and pepper, into the oven. Once they're starting to get quite crispy, I then squash them down with a potato masher, so they flatten slightly and break. And the joy of that, Carl, is that they absorb more oil and they get crispier, but they remain super fluffy in the middle.
That's wonderful. And that's a little bit of a nod towards the punched potato of Portugal, isn't it? Because I was horrified to discover that people punch potatoes in Portugal. But that is a literal translation of one of the potato recipes here. You guys,
it's going to be on the cafe, Hipster Cafe, in the next year when we reopen. Punched potato, punched avocado.
Obviously. And you can let off a bit of stress management and cooking together there. You guys are awesome. I've so loved talking to you this morning. I hope we can do this again sometime. And good luck with the Village Kitchen.
Oh,
thanks.
Take care. Bye for now. Thanks everybody for taking part.